All right, hello everyone. Welcome to our next interview for a Good Soil Investment on our YouTube channel. This is really interesting. Matt and I have been wanting to interview a couple of Rivian product owners, enthusiasts, investors, and we found Robert and Ted um, that are both meet those criteria. They're going to talk with us today. And Robert was kind enough to give me a really interesting, a really cool product demo of his R1T at the TeslaCon event. It was definitely felt like the Tesla driving experience, like a really fast car. Um, Good handling, nice technology inside of it. It was a 10-minute drive, but from what I gathered, it seemed really nice. And Ted joined me on a Twitter Spaces after Tesla earnings as one of the speakers, and I noticed in his profile he had a Rivian or R1T owner tag on it. So I pinged him separately, and they both agreed kindly to join us. Welcome, Robert and Ted.
Welcome. Thanks.
So, sure,
Hi, Emmet. Thanks for having us.
sure. Have you guys been following Rivian for a long? I mean, we'll start with you, Robert. You were an early reservation holder. I think you disclosed to me for the Rivian truck.
Yeah, I was a day
how
one
long?
reservation holder.
Oh wow! So what do you remember? What year, what date, or month, or what that was by any chance?
It's only ingrained in my brain. November 18th, 18. The day after
Oh wow! Okay, so you've been
the
waiting a
reservations
while.
were available is when I booked it, and finally took possession of it March 8th of this year. So yeah, it was like 3 years, 4 months, and 2 days, I think, from reservation to actual pickup. So.
Okay, well that's about how long we're waiting for our Cybertrucks. It seems standard. A few years, wait. So, but you got the Rivian truck, and when did you take delivery? If you don't mind me asking. So you've had it
So
for
I
how
took
long have you had it? How many
delivery
miles have you driven it?
March 8th. I've had it just over a month now. And I just crossed
Okay.
5,500 miles on it the other day. Um, yeah, I drive hard,
Wow,
but
that's a
I
lot.
also had a 2,000 mile trip from Houston, Texas, all the way up to Denver, Colorado. Surprisingly, I didn't see any other R1Ts on the road when I was driving up here. I can't think why.
How did that trip go? I mean, you stopped at third-party charging networks. I assume everything went
Yep, we
smoothly, or was
stopped
there any
at
issues?
we stopped at 7 chargers along the way, all Electrify America stations. Um, the first two that we stopped at in Waco and Denton were not the ideal Electrify America experience. Had some severe issues with the charging stations there, but luckily the rest of the trip past that was actually perfectly fine. Um, we then
Okay.
we got
If you
to
don't mind me asking, what happened with Electrify America? What happened with the Electrify American charging stations?
so the first one we went to, we knew that was going to be the one of the longest legs. It was Houston to Waco, and we pulled
Wow.
into Waco. We had 20% battery left, and when we pulled into the station, it just would not connect. There was just it wouldn't connect. It wouldn't it wouldn't handshake. The app that was on the phone just would not work. Ended up calling sorry, not Rivian Support, Electrify America support, and was like, "Hey, what's going on here?" And they said, "Oh, we can remote start it for you, not a problem." So they ran through, we just need your authorization to do this. So I was like, "Fine, here's my authorization." And what it ended up doing was actually remotely authorizing the station. For some reason, that it just wasn't handshaking properly. Um, After that, the second stop, again, having been soured by the first stop, I was like, okay, this is not an omen that I want for the rest of the trip here. And I was like, I really hope that the next one goes smoother. And it handshaked, but it turned it off immediately. Like it started it and then immediately stopped the session. And I was like, this is not right. So I called up again Electrify America, and I will say Electrify America's support team, if you've ever had to call them, are amazing. They get big handshakes from me. Um, but got to the second station, it stopped it almost immediately. Called them up and I said, "Hey, what's going on?" They're like, "We're going to remote restart the station, and then we'll go ahead and we'll remote authorize the transaction." I was like, "Okay, fine." So again, it started up. The rest of the stops along the way, however, didn't have a single problem. So I don't know if it was just those two in Texas, but everywhere else from Oklahoma, Kansas, Wichita, and then into Colorado, didn't have a single problem. Colorado, however, was a completely different experience.
So how long were those first two stops, and then what was the normal stop after that in terms of how long you were stopped?
Normal stops, my average time for normal stops was about 25 to 30 minutes. I actually followed Kyle from Out of Specs, suggestion guide of getting it to 67, 70% and then running. And that's pretty much what we maintained. There was one or two stops that we stopped at that were like an hour and a half. That's just because I was being a fat ass and I was having dinner or lunch. So, there's that.
Sure.
No,
I mean, that's a normal, anyone who's done road trips in the Navy kind of knows that that's kind of standard operating procedure. But so the delay in your first two with the, issues you ran into there, I mean, was it the sort of thing that was like an inconvenience and a 10-minute phone call, or was it, more substantial?
I wish it was a 10-minute phone call. So the first stop we ended up staying at for almost an hour and 15 minutes for what was designated to be a 32 and a half minute charging stop. And we were there for almost an hour and a half. But the thing is, we were running to a schedule, especially on the second day, because there was people that we wanted to see. And running to that schedule, we actually had to move our hotel back by one charging stop. Luckily, I'd already planned that ahead of time, and I had two reservations going, so I was able to cancel one or cancel the other. But it was an inconvenience more than anything. And, having that drive and, on top of the fact of, packing my house up and moving my house, it was then also the taxation of actually the additional drive up there. But the real fun started when I was 4 foot into Colorado. Past the
all right. I think we need to unpack that a little. What happened?
Yeah, we definitely want to unpack this. Now, I will preference this by saying that, and I've got a picture. I can send it to Emmet or something. But my phone log for this day, for Sunday, was 29 phone calls to Rivian Support. I got into Colorado. 29 phone calls.
Wow.
I literally, and it continued all the way through to Monday. There was additional phone calls on Monday as well. But I got 4 foot into Colorado. They've got a wonderful sign there that says, "Welcome to colorful Colorado." I had my wife with me. She was my passenger. And so we pulled up, we got out, we took a picture of the sign. It was all glorious and happy. And we took off from the sign, and all of a sudden my R1T looked like a Christmas light. All the dash was just illuminated. I had warning lights going off. I had bells going off. I had, you name it. I had an alarm and a bell going off for it. I had suspension alarms. I had ABS alarms. I had tire alarms. Everything, you name the gamut, I had it. So I very quickly pulled over, and I was like, okay, well, let's diagnose the problem. As I pulled over, I got a phone call. "This is the Rivian Support online service system. We've noticed a problem with your system. Can we talk to you about it?" I'm like, I haven't even pushed the magic SOS button yet. I was just trying to figure it out on my own. So I said, all right, no problem. So I actually ignored the call because I didn't quite want to talk to them yet. So I ignored the call. I looked over the vehicle. The vehicle looked to be in good shape. I will say that the flashlight in the door handle, it's good for getting underneath and checking out things. And pulled off the road, started looking around the vehicle, doing a standard assessment on what was going on. Didn't see anything readily wrong. So I called Rivian Support back and I said, right, this is what's going on. This is what my truck has just done to me. Now, I will preface this by saying that the trip up to Colorado, I had called Rivian Support like 4 or 5 times. There was a problem with Driver Plus that I was having. I had a rear-mounted bike rack, and every time that the vehicle was slowing down, the bike would, sway forward, and Driver Plus thought I was about to be rear-ended, and so it would accelerate me out. Which is a really nice safety feature, but when you're going along the freeway and all of a sudden you start pulsing down the freeway because your bike is swinging you, it's not the best feeling. So I ended up actually covering the sensor there so that it didn't detect it. But then, of course, it was faulting because, hey, I can't read one of my sensors. What's going on? So it was an interesting, first part of the drive. But back to Colorado, so I got up here and, the vehicle looked to be in good condition mechanically. I will preface this by saying I did not have the spare tire. And if you're a Rivian owner and you think that you really want to own the truck, get the spare tire. It will save you a lot of headache in the future. Also, throw the goo away because it's useless. So managed to pull the vehicle over, looked it over, it was fine. Called Rivian Support and said, hey, what's going on with all this? This is just, something's wrong here. They remote diagnosed it and they said, it looks like you have a leak that was detected in your front right tire. Can you check the tire? And I was like, tire looks fine. I checked it. I didn't see any air leaks. I took a spray bottle to it and sprayed it down with some water. Didn't see anything. I was like, great, no problem. Let's keep moving. So we're driving along, and I've changed over the display now, so I'm actively watching the tire temperature or the tire pressure, and I could see it just incrementally dropping down. And I'm like, okay, there's got to be a slow leak somewhere. I just don't know where it's at. Luckily, I had 26 miles to an EA station that I needed to get a charge on. And I was like, okay, great. We're going to make it to the charge stop. We're going to get a charge. We're going to suss out the tire. We're going to talk with Rivian Support. If needs be, they'll send a tow truck. Oh, wait, it's Easter Sunday. Nobody's working.
Bummer.
So I get to the EA station. Rivian Support was on the phone with me the whole entire time. We finally found the pinprick tire hole that was right at the transition from the tread all the way to the sidewall. So it was just at that transition point. I was like, technically, this is a sidewall incident. This is not, anything out of the normal. This is a sidewall incident. We actually parked the truck at about a 25-degree angle so we could get the goo to flow into the sidewall to hopefully, cover up the incident spot. Drove it another 40 miles to a little town called Lyman and had an emergency overnight stay in Lyman. And Monday morning, Rivian Support picked us up in a flatbed and actually came and dragged us into Denver. And we were in Denver. They said, right, we're here. We have a spare tire for you. We'll change it out for you. Not a problem. The cost was a little bit on the heftier side than I was expecting, but especially with a sidewall damage there. And then they got me back on the road, and I'm actually going to take the truck back next week for a planned service that was 4 weeks ago when I picked up the vehicle. So,
okay, interesting first road trip experience. I mean, it sounds like their service is they have a lot of good service at least, and this type of flat tire could have happened with any car.
Yeah. Their service team was absolutely incredible, and this just goes to prove that and I spoke with a couple of the guys at the service center, and they're all former Tesla alum, so they've been through the ramp up with Tesla, and they know how that's going to be, and they're ready for it, and they're prepared. So their service team. I hate to use the analogy, but they're the Chick-fil-A of service teams right now, because they answer a call whenever you have one, and they will take care of you immediately almost. So, and they'll almost bend over backwards for you. So
that's great. Well, let's move on to Ted a little bit. Get Ted involved here. Ted, when did you order your first Rivian, and when did you get delivery? How many miles have you driven it? What's your experience been like with the product so far? Give us a little background on you, I guess, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so for me, I was early on as well. So I think it was like in 2018, shortly after they opened their reservations. I don't drive quite as much as Robert, but I've had it since December 2021, and I have about like 2,800 miles on it.
Oh wow!
And I know a lot of like the Rivian core customer is the ones that they go camping, they go off roading, etc. I'm probably gonna be in the majority of like the concrete jungle people. So you're gonna see these Rivians where the Escalades are in the shopping mall. For me, like the closest thing is like I take my husky to the dog park and like different parks and stuff. So I appreciate the ruggedness and the car being able to get dirty and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I bought this thing because A, it looks super cool, and B, like just by its electric architecture, I knew it was going to be great, right? Because like when I first got the Model X, I was like the Tesla Model X, I was like, wow, this handles a lot smaller than it is. I like going to Home Depot a lot, so I really need the pickup truck bed, and I just couldn't bring myself to buy like F-150 or a 250 Super Duty or whatever it is, and I was 100% right. This thing performs like a sports car. It has the utility of exactly what I need of a pickup truck. I transported a giant elliptical in it. It was great.
Wow.
It's been really, really good. And to Robert's point, like service has been great. So I don't know if I'm like the special man or something, but like I've seldom had Teslas with issues.
Yeah.
And my Rivian, the only issue I really had was with the tonneau cover, which was totally the power tonneau cover. Back when I first got it, it jammed up a little bit, and then engineering made a fix that I think they fixed for all the future VINs and for future owners. They changed the angle of the slots a little bit so it goes in a little better. And it can handle things that are slightly thicker if it's on top, like a leaf or bird poop or something like that, so it doesn't jam it up.
Yeah.
I really can't complain. They nailed this truck. It's great. It's
and
really
when
great.
did you get your first Tesla, Ted? You said 11 Teslas or something. When was your first one?
Yeah. My first one was a 2014 P85 Model S P85.
So that was a little bit. My first one, I got like a 2013 Model S, and I think it was a 60 kilowatt battery, and it had like the full sunroof. Back then they had some of the Model S's with like the giant moon roof or something. It was a sunroof.
I wish they kept it. I wish they kept it. That
too. It was
amazing.
Awesome. But I realized I was one of the first couple thousand Model S owners, just like you guys are one of the first couple thousand Rivian owners, and you got to expect there's going to be issues with those first few early adopters. So it's to be expected, And my sunroof, I remember at one point it like cracked, and then it like wouldn't close. I don't know. So there's like little issues like that always happens. I had an issue with my first Model S actually, where after a week or two, I had something similar to Robert, but all of a sudden it wouldn't drive and it wouldn't start. And I called Tesla, and it was funny. I ended up guessing Elon Musk's email address back then before he was uber famous. And I got like a call, like this was 2 weeks later after they weren't solving it, but they gave me like a rental car for 2 weeks and they're paying for it. But I wanted my Model S back, but I couldn't figure it out because they didn't have a service network really very good in Connecticut at the time. I was like one of the first Model S owners in Connecticut. Anyway, 2 weeks later, Elon, I guessed his email, and I got a phone call from like the Queens, New York service manager like 10 minutes later saying, we're going to send a tow truck to pick your car up tonight and bring it back to our shop to switch it out with the part and get it back to you. Great. And then Elon emails me back, and I had a nice email. It was like, wow, he was really involved even in 2013. I wonder if RJ, the head of, that's one question I have about Rivian. One concern is it's so hard to succeed. I wonder if something like RJ is like as involved as Elon was even back then getting it going. Like if someone could guess RJ's email and send him a note, like because they didn't feel like service at Rivian was doing well, would RJ email them back? Because he's not uber famous he can respond if he was real. But I don't know. We'll find out, I guess. But Elon has slept on factory floors. We can talk more about that stuff. But Rivian's product is, the test drove I took was nice, and you folks I know really like it. I mean, your overall experience, Ted, it's pretty good with the R1T. Or is there what's the drawback? Any drawbacks?
I mean, I guess I wish there was put it this way, for me, it's I'm 6'3", so it's very easy for me to get into. One of the feedback that I told Rivian is you guys got to get like running boards or a step or something, because like my mother, for instance, she can't get up on the thing, and like there's no handle by the A pillar for somebody to grab. So like these kinds of like small things are like my drawbacks, but it is like a daily usability thing, and I hope the aftermarket does address it. But for me, it's like, especially going to the New York Auto Show this past weekend, Rivian is like worlds like ahead of a Ford Lightning. I mean, I hate to call it out, but man, that the interior in that was like horrible.
So you've seen the Ford Lightning, you've seen the Ford Lightning interior, and you've
Yeah, they had like a whole setup. Like I've driven every EV so far, like even the BMW iX. The like my friend had one of the first Ford Mach-E's that she's regretting every day on the island. Like, and it's just like the value is not there. Put it that way. Like let's be real. The Teslas, the Rivians, they're not cheap, but it's a question of value, right? And like the interior quality, the way the thing drives, the software, you're paying for the entire package. And like I haven't found anything that's better, like that's better in these market segments. I really haven't. And even what's coming, I just like the battery tech. Rivian and Tesla are so far ahead. It's not even funny. It's just crazy.
Yeah, and Robert, how would you kind of evaluate your overall experience? I did see the video where you gave Emmet and Dave Lee and Ellie and a few others the test drive, and you definitely seem to be super enthusiastic about it. Loved the product. After your kind of road trip experience and owning it for a bit longer, how would you kind of say? Obviously, with a product startup like this, you're going to expect some issues, but have they been kind of on par with what you've expected? And how would you rate your overall kind of ownership experience so far?
Yeah, no, I'll agree. Almost 100% with Ted. The only difference is mine's not going to be a princess pavement. Mine's actually on Saturday. It's going out in the mud. But yeah, overall ownership experience has been exactly on par. I mean, the service team has been incredible. I had the luxury to actually sit in an F-150 Lightning. I have a reservation for an F-150 Lightning for the wife. And you have a supercar as a truck. That's basically the best way to explain it. Yes, I guarantee that there's going to be little nuanced things like driving home the other day. My front display cluster showed me running over 3 cars, 2 pedestrians, and a motorcycle. There was no one else on the road. There's little UI bugs like that I fully expect. And the fact is, I can make that recording. I can send it into Rivian and say, hey, this is what I'm experiencing. I've timestamped it. Go have the diagnostic team take a look at it. And they've been really responsive as to say, hey, yeah, we need something. And to Ted's point as well, I'll say that, yes, it needs running boards or a grab handle like you wouldn't believe. My wife is 5'2", and she has a hard time getting it.
Gosh.
I do know I'm 6'5", so it's the complete polar opposite. But I will say also to the fact that I do know that they're coming out with a mode called Easy Entry, which actually is going to be based on your driver profile. We'll actually lower it down to a set profile height. So of course mine's going to be set to max, and my wife's probably going to be set to the lowest. So I know that that's coming here soon. But yes, running boards would be absolutely amazing. So RJ, if you're listening, running boards, please.
Yeah, I think you're talking about Neil mode or something like that, right? And I mean, going back to just, and I want to mention this, it's like when I first test drove the Model S back in like June 2012. Like I'm not like an EV guy. I just love cars in general.
Was that in New Jersey at an event in New Jersey? Was that at an event in New Jersey?
No, it was one of the stores that opened up.
Okay.
I like the second I hit the accelerator, I was like everything just went out the door. I was like, oh my God, this thing's amazing. It's going to change the world, etc. When I drove the Rivian, I had that feeling again, except this time it's in a different segment. You're not looking at a luxury sedan. You're looking at the pickups, right? And I would argue in America that's like an even bigger deal, right? And the most striking thing to me, and I've been saying this since day one, what's magic and what I think like separates Rivian from everybody else, even Tesla, is that bloody suspension system. The suspension and the roll control system that they have. Oh my god! Like if that like gets put into every other electric vehicle, like I can't like that could be a business in and of itself.
Well, I mean, they
And
still
I had that same feeling.
Yeah, they stole that suspension system from, well, I wouldn't say stole. They borrowed it from the McLaren 720S.
From like Audi or whatever it was.
Yeah, it was McLaren 720S. It was the McLaren engineering system. But yeah, that suspension system is absolutely amazing. I mean, you go back to my road trip. I did 96 miles on a flat tire, and the suspension just didn't care. It was totally fine to just say, hey, we're going to just eat it up and keep going. So, but yeah.
And Ted, you said you have a Model X Plaid, is that right?
Yeah, I had a Model S Plaid, and then the wife forced me to upgrade to an X again.
Because that has the updated air suspension, right? 'Cause I would agree with you. Like one of my complaints about the Model Y, which generally I love, but like the suspension admittedly leaves something to be desired. But I've heard that the air suspension, which I believe is on the latest Model X Plaid, is kind of alleviates a lot of those pain points. So how would you compare the Rivian suspension system to what you're seeing with like the latest and greatest out of the Model X Plaid air suspension system?
Yeah. The Rivian is much more adaptable, but it's just due to the physics of it. I think the struts are a lot bigger too, and also it's like it's a truck. They have more room to work with. But what I will say with the Raven suspension versus pre-Raven, which is what's in the Plaid now, the Raven's what's in the Plaid now. It's remarkable because it makes the car feel like a third of its size, and like for me, that like a car that handles well, that handles smaller than it actually is, that's the hallmark of a good car, car, truck, vehicle, whatever it is, and yeah, it's like there's no way to even put it. It just feels like it's a lot tighter. Like I don't know if you guys driven like body on frame SUVs or like 3-row SUVs. When you have that initial turn in, it's like the back follows you 2 seconds later. That's kind of how it was with the pre-Raven Model X, but with Raven and all the new ones subsequently later, it feels so tight, almost like a Model S. So like comparing it to the Rivian though. I don't know. I don't even know if it's really ride quality is similar, but the Rivian just has so much more versatility. Like, but it's built for that. It's a question of like if you have like for example a Jeep Wrangler with no suspension mods versus like one that with a lift kit and like $40,000 of suspension work. The Rivian like has all of that right out of the box.
That's nice. Yeah. Yeah. Now, I guess moving on to the next portion of our chat, like it's great to get all your feedback of the product and using it. Next portion, I want to touch on what you guys think about the business. I know you follow the company closely, early reservation holder. Robert, I think you even mentioned you're part of like a forum of community members online or something of Rivian owners. Maybe it was in Texas or it might have been. I think you were.
Yeah. I'm the admin for the
close eye in the business.
So I'm an admin for the Lone Star Rivian group on Facebook, which is specific to Texas owners only. I still maintain that. As far as
how many are there on there? If you don't mind me asking.
I think as of yesterday we were up to 1,500 members or so.
Wow.
I mean, we're on there. I mean, there's a lot of them though that are waiting for the reservations. There's only I think about 20 or 30 that actually have actually have their trucks in hand. And one thing also is we have also got all the R1S owners on there. So we constantly get a daily barrage of, hey, where's my R1S? Where's my R1S? So, it's coming. But I will say that, the Rivian as a company, the only thing I can really fault them on is communication. I mean, there's been whole periods, and I'm sure Ted will exact this, the fact that we have months where we don't hear any information whatsoever, and then all of a sudden we hear a little blurb, but it's not really anything pertinent to what's going on. It's just a blurb to say, hey, we're still alive. But at the same time, we're like, we want more details. We need the engineering details. We need to know what's going on. And then they'll come out with, crazy things like the price hike. And then all of a sudden we'll have this fluster of news, and, people, bashing them. And I'm like, guys, this was totally to be expected. I mean, we were, for Ted and I, early day one reservation holders, we weren't going to waver. I mean, they could have raised, I can't speak to Ted, but I know I personally, if they raised the price 40,000 or even 50,000, I still would have paid it, because like Ted said, it's a luxury car in a truck market. They're following the exact same thing that Elon did with Tesla. You release a uber exotic vehicle, the Roadster, you make it electric, and you prove the concept that it works, and then from there you can further out and branch. I know for me personally, they could have raised the price to 2 million, and I still would have bought it. So
yeah, you're really enthusiastic about it. And what do you think the temperature is of, you mentioned that kind of online forum, 1,500 members in Texas alone. That's astounding to me. So what's the temperature of, you're obviously one of the most enthusiastic early day one holders, administrator of that group. Are a lot of people on there? Is it mixed? I mean, I'm sure a lot of people were upset about the price. Not everyone, but some people must have been annoyed about the price hike. Or what kind of,
yeah, there was a bunch of people that were really, really upset about the price hike. There was a bunch of people that, but it's funny, you have an event, like, we'll use the price hike. You have this event, and all of a sudden, you now have both sides of the coin coming out in force, for and against. I will say that we did lose members. I also belong to the Rivian owners group on Facebook, and they got well in excess of, I believe, 5,500, 6,000 members on there. But it's really funny because you go to the forums and you look at it, and you can just see the polar opposites that come out. There's no mid ground. It's either you're 100% for it or you're 100% against it. And some of the battles, I mean, being the moderator, I had to step in a couple of times and actually, block a couple of posts because people were starting to get really verbal about it. But having said that, I mean, the overall temperature, I'd say, is still lukewarm. I mean, there's, you've got people like myself who are absolutely enthusiastic. I'll talk to anyone about it. I mean, for hours on end, as you saw at the Tesla call. But then there's also people on there that just come on there. In fact, a good friend of mine coined the phrase, "Oh, you're here for an argument. Let's have one." And it's literally, it's that they're there to argue the point that EVs are bad, or that Rivian will never succeed, or you look at the EPS on them, or you look at the stock price on them, or you look at how many they've produced versus what they say they're going to do. And yeah, they're a startup. They're going through production hell right now. Same that Tesla did. Now, I will preface this. I was never a Tesla owner, unlike Ted, who's got 11 of them. I never owned a single Tesla. I actually had a Ford Mach-E. And so I was super excited about my Mach-E. But I also built 2 of my own EVs. So I know the production side that he's going through. And I totally understand where the growing pains are. I'm in manufacturing as my regular day job. I'm a manufacturing engineer. And so that I understand that, and I can see where he's coming from, and I can see, where the argument's coming from. So.
Yeah. And, getting to the business point a little bit, I mean, these are reservations that were made, back in 2018 for the most part, that they're fulfilling now. And the market has frankly changed quite a bit since then. I mean, we're seeing commodity prices skyrocket. logistical challenges, supply chain issues across the entire industry and across many industries. So, as a, I'd like to think of myself as a somewhat kind of dispassionate observer of Rivian. Yeah, I definitely want them to win just from a overall kind of EV adoption standpoint, but I'm skeptical of some of the practices that they have. So, just kind of putting my cards out on the table there. It does seem that they probably need to raise prices. I mean, they're seeing some, cost pressures for sure, and trying to honor prices from 4 years ago when the market was just in a different place, and they were probably guessing at a lot of their costs and manufacturing procedures, whereas now they know what the choke points are, they know exactly what they've got a much better kind of picture of what their costs are going to look like. So I guess the question I have on their business is, how would you expect them to kind of continue raising their prices in this medium term, and how do you expect demand do you think there's enough kind of demand out there for them to be raising prices to the point where they probably need to, and then where do they go beyond here? This is maybe we'll just start with that, because I've got maybe a follow-up question. So Ted, what do you think about kind of the market acceptance of further price increases, which it sounds like we all agree they probably need to do?
I think the current pricing scheme they have is actually pretty decent, market competitive and all that. But like this truck is easily worth 120,000, like 100% in my mind. It 100% is minimum, right, for quad motor, etc. Right, but in terms of the company itself, the skepticism that you're seeing is totally reasonable, I think. But I will say this. Where Rivian is at now, a lot of people ask me this question, and I'm in finance. That's my trade. So a lot of people are like, okay, like they're burning through cash, all this kind of stuff. People reserved a whole, like for years, and they waited. And there's no news. To Robert's point, there's not a peep. But like I've been through the whole Model 3 thing, where there was no $35,000 Model 3 unless you called the showroom to actually buy it, to get a base build that's software locked. We've been through all the different like price increases, and mind you, it's price increases are everywhere. It's not just Rivian. It's just
right.
how it's tacked on, right? If you go into a dealer and let's say you try to buy a Toyota 4Runner right now, there's a market adjustment of $20,000 to $30,000, and people will still pay it even though it's a markup. But besides the point, where Rivian is currently at. So they have this plant in Normal, Illinois, right? It was an old Mitsubishi plant that they refitted. Back in the day, Tesla, they bought Numi. They refitted. So, and then Tesla started to open up more plants as they got less dumb with manufacturing and are really excelling at it. Rivian has that advantage that Tesla didn't have, which at the time is time and cash, right? So they're really good with so far they're pretty good with their CapEx. Like they're actually putting out like estimates. We're going to spend $2.5 billion in CapEx this year, and this is what we're going to spend it on. Right. The difference here is it's like, for the record, they're opening a second plant in Atlanta or Georgia, somewhere in Georgia, and they're being smart with their money. But the difference up front is the way Rivian is spending it during all this COVID supply chain stuff is they're developing the infrastructure first, meaning the service infrastructure. They're hiring the right people to do the deliveries and all that kind of stuff. Tesla didn't have that time to do that, right? They were kind of just like picking up as they went along, right? Versus Rivian, they could lay the foundation and then go. So of course, the market, there's no patience for this. We care about the quarter and then the quarter and the quarter after, right? But Rivian is taking the time to do that, and I think what's really nice here is Rivian is starting to vertically integrate, and they're doing so in not up front because they have to get these trucks out the door, but they're doing it incrementally as they go along so they could improve their gross margin, kind of like Tesla did, right? So number one, they're bringing their motors in house. They're making the dual motor version, which I'm actually really looking forward to, and they're making their own permanent magnet motors. The next thing is like, where's Rivian go in the future, right? Let's say if they didn't have the pickup trucks, no R1S, no R1T. They have their EDV, right? That's their delivery vehicle. People don't understand how big this market is, because if you look at all the what do you call it? the franchisees that Amazon has for their delivery and fulfillment services, they're all using like Sprinters, the Dodge Ram, small transport trucks. This market alone could just justify like Rivian's valuation and IPO, like minimum, right? But instead they're going after the Range Rovers, the Escalades of the world, right? Because ultimately, like, these things have to go, and nobody else is like really moving. I hate to say it, the Model X is fantastic, but sometimes you want a boxy SUV. I want a boxy SUV, and I have come to terms that Elon and Franz will never do this. They will never make a box, right? And nobody in the market is doing it. I mean, some would argue the Lucid Gravity, maybe, right, or the Canoe or whatever it is, right? But Rivian is the only one that has a clear path forward and a clear product map, and also like a company hedge with Amazon. Like, there's no other company that does this. So sorry if I'm.
No. I want to pick up a little bit on the couple things you just said. I mean, one, I kind of agree with you. Like the R1S and the R1T, to me, they kind of seem like a niche product, but from a business standpoint, it seems like there's a lot bigger opportunity for kind of transforming the delivery economics of Amazon and all the other UPS, FedEx of the world. I mean, that's the cost to operate those vehicles is just stupid, and it makes all the sense in the world to switch to an EV. But on the kind of comment you made on vertical integration and them spending cash smartly, I want to push back gently on that a little bit if I can. The amount of money that they're spending, I mean, if you look at their Q4 results, which is the latest available, they spent over $2 billion in OPEX, which was actually more than Tesla just spent in Q1 by a couple $100 million, despite the fact that they're just in drastically different, phases of scale. So, I think you're kind of making the point that they're investing up front so they can scale in the future. But I think that there's a reasonable counterpoint to be made that you kind of surviving on lean times and maybe not being able to, IPO at a super high valuation and kind of get that 17 billion of cash in hand that they're sitting on now. Maybe if you didn't have that luxury, which Rivian does have right now, it would force you to be a little bit leaner and a little bit more cost effective over time. What do you think about that, difference between, Rivian potentially being a little bloated versus your point of view that, they're just investing for the future?
Yeah. My counterpoint to that is really like a lot like to Robert's point. There's a lot of ex-Tesla there, right? And Rivian is fortunate enough to see and learn from others' mistakes. So I wouldn't say that they're bloated because we don't really know what's in that R&D line. We just know that there's a lot of stuff in the pipe. And it's really a question of like, all right, is stuff coming out? And it's hard to gauge because of COVID-19, right? The whole supply chain fiasco. Like, you need stuff to make stuff. You need people to make the stuff, right? And for me, it's like they're hiring, which is great, right? Products are coming out, and they're getting, unfortunately, they're some people aren't getting their ocean coast and forest green and interior, all that kind of stuff, because they're optimizing for volume, right? So like that least lucky supplier is going to hold them back on the truck. So they're going to like make what's available first and pump it out there. Like, if they were not doing that, I would be a little bit concerned, because then they're kind of like riding on their coattails, right? Oh, you got truck of the year, all that kind of stuff. It's like, no. We got to get these out the door. There is there is a sense of urgency without even like people realizing it. And I would say a lot of the bias that we see out there right now, it's very similar to what Tesla saw with the Model 3 ramp. Like, for example, panel gaps were never really a thing that, the average consumer measured. And then all of a sudden, Tesla comes along and, people are whipping out rulers on delivery day. I'm like, guys, enjoy your car, right? And then, if you find a gap, you're like, oh, but they're spending billions and they can't get this right, blah, 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 blah. It's like, it's you have to look at what's really going on in the company. And they're telling you in the statements, we're making our own drivetrains. We're going to optimize our factory. we're pumping out cars as soon as we can and as quickly as we can, as humanly possible, right? I wish there was no COVID for a multitude of reasons, because I think this business would just like they would be cranking out 50K cars plus, because they got the manpower to do it, all that kind of stuff. But it's a question of like channeling your resources, right? There's only so much you could do. Like that would be my counterpoint. It's like we have to wait and see. And what fortunately they do have enough liquidity where it's like, they could weather this a little bit, and we'll see how their ramp goes. But
and
for me,
you're
it's
right
pretty
that
good.
they do have the backing of Amazon. So I don't think they're anything of a like bankruptcy risk or anything like that in the next several years, and probably even beyond that. But in terms of their kind of profitability and cash flow generation, without diving too much into the weeds, and this is their first quarter where they, actually were producing cars in Q4. We don't have their Q1 numbers yet, but in Q4, I want to not put too much emphasis on this number, but their gross margin was, negative 700%, which meant, like for every dollar they were bringing in of revenue, guys like you were handing over to them. I mean, their costs were 7 times that amount. And I've gone back through, the Tesla's historical figures in 2012 when they were ramping the Model S, and, during the Model 3 ramp, and they were, not good gross margin figures, to be clear, but they were never quite as negative as Rivian's. And like I said, I'd probably put a lot more weight on the Q1 numbers whenever they post those, because that would be, much further in the ramp. May 11th, yeah.
Yeah,
but I mean, do those
too, right, Matt? These are just snapshots. There's
just
first
snapshots.
Quarters.
Yeah,
it could change drastically in the coming quarters to not be such a loss. But yeah, it's a good point, Matt.
So I guess the argument you'd have to make is that COVID-19 and all these disruptions are so severely disrupting their ability to produce that they've essentially built all this infrastructure, and now they need to be able to grow into it. So I guess my question for both of you is, like, do you think it's realistic that they kind of grow into their current cost structure, in such a way that where they really are producing, the gross margins that would, justify the valuation? Obviously, it won't be this year. We don't need to, ding them too hard while they're in the middle of this very difficult ramp. But how do you see them, kind of growing to the point where they're able to overcome this, kind of pretty poor performance, at least when you're benchmarking them against Tesla?
So I'll say that I think that they may actually grow into it this year. I'm going to be super optimistic about it. I actually think that they will grow into it this year. I think the only downside that I think that they've done so far is the Georgia plant. I think is a waste right now, unless they're going to put the delivery vehicles over there and leave normal specifically for the R1Ts and the R1Ss. I don't think that, and Elon has capped on it as well, and I'm sure Ted will recite the same. But the plant in Georgia, I think, is a capex expenditure waste. I don't think they need to be doing that right now. I think they need to focus. They've got their bucket. They need to spend that bucket wisely, and spending that bucket in Illinois and getting through production hardships now in Illinois. And then, just like with Tesla, they built out Hawthorne, and they got it up and running, and then they went out and produced the other factories. Then they produced Giga Nevada, and then they went out to Shanghai and to Berlin, and then the rumored Giga India factory. So yes, they can do it down the road. I think that the better expenditure would have been to spend it, in just normal. I mean, Ted, do you agree with that?
Like in terms of gross margin, just to go back to Matt's point, I'm really curious to know what's in that COGS number, because like I wonder where service is, because I know they spent a lot of money on service, because they wanted to kind of do what Tesla didn't do when they first started. Yeah. But anyway, to Robert's point, I think it was smart to at least sign Georgia, because I think there's going to be a lot of permitting things and a lot of red tape to go through. And I think they kind of just wanted to get the ball rolling. I'm of that opinion, right? They're not gonna roll out like a template like Tesla did and just have something from soil to production in a year. Let's get real. Like Musk has that power. I don't think RJ's there yet, because he has that like weird celebrity about him. But I think it was one of those things to get the ball rolling. I also think part of it was also just to kind of satiate kind of institutional investor appetite, just to say, hey, we do have something. And also, I think it's a hedge too, right? It depends on, we don't know what's going to happen, in terms of the pandemic. What's the next phase going to be? Like, what's going to slow you down? Are you going to run out of aluminum or steel for beams or whatever it is, right? Like, it's hard to say, but it's like, I think the vast majority is going to normal. And I think the annualized production there is 200K, and I think Georgia's plan is 600,000.
Wow.
So I think they're kind of like signaling to the public, hey, yes, it's a $70 billion IPO, but we're going to be big. Like, we're going to be really big.
How many are they estimating to produce this year and next year? Do either of you know? I'm just what they're estimating.
I think the goal is what, 20. They halved it to like 25K units delivered this year.
I believe that's about right. Yeah.
I'm of the opinion I think they're sandbagging it a little bit, but as they should though.
Yeah.
Because we really don't know what's going to happen and where they're getting parts from, right? If something, like I remember with Tesla, like they ran out of like USB cables, and then they had to like stop production in the S like for a little bit. That's crazy.
Yeah.
So I think they're trying to avoid and pad a little bit there.
And what's the estimate for next year? Anyone know the estimate for next year? Maybe it's not their own projections, but what consensus?
I don't think
I don't know them either. But I will say that yes,
it might be 50.
You think it's 50?
You know what? I have to look it up later. I'm not.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
But they have how many reservation holders? Like 100,000 reservation holders.
150.
I think. Well, they're going to give another update. I think they were at like 150.
I thought they were 150
like
on the last time.
Oh, the last time. Wow. Yeah. I mean, I believe it though, because like I drive this thing around and people still have no clue what it is, but it's like I'm breaking necks every time I drive. And like I was even looking at like Google Trends and stuff, and the only peak that there was really during IPO time for both Rivian and RIVN. So like the awareness isn't quite there yet, and it's gonna be like Model S, like word of mouth.
Yeah.
And I think the concentration of the searches, surprisingly, are in California. No, unsurprisingly, in California and Washington State.
Yeah.
So there's so much potential that can be unlocked here. And I think just to add to the business point and like to Robert's point, can they grow into the valuation? There is something Rivian's working on that I think is fascinating, and it's their it's like their fleet software.
Mm-hmm.
And this is one of the things I saw when, like, one of the times they refreshed the site. You could configure R1T, configure R1S, and then there was a fleet tab. And I was like, that's very interesting. There's a fleet tab here. Tesla used to have this. It was buried somewhere on the site, but Rivian has it right there out front. Mm-hmm. And for me, it's like they're working on fleet software. Gee, who else works on fleet software? UPS does. Mm-hmm. The whole making right turns only. That's not random, right? I'm like, if Rivian can somehow create, some kind of SaaS that they could pair with their cars, oh my God, they're literally sitting on a gold mine. And Tesla is not even touching this market yet. Mm-hmm. They're like, well, maybe with the semis, it could be argued, but that's for long haul. We're talking about that last mile delivery, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's very, very smart. They did the whole outdoorsy thing versus, a Cybertruck, which could be a work truck potentially, but you can't really put a ladder on that thing, so we'll see. But like Rivian is kind of like filling the gaps where Tesla is not present.
Yeah,